Member for Wanguri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member of the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, I rise to speak on the final report on voluntary assisted dying in the Northern Territory 2025. This report captures one of the most deeply human consultations undertaken by this Parliament. A conversation about suffering, compassion, culture and choice of how those who wish to die. Madam Speaker, earlier today, by the Chair of the Committee, Member for Fong Lim, used the words choice the finisher. When a person has advanced and progressive condition which is expected to cause death and is causing intolerable and enduring suffering that is actual or anticipated. Madam Speaker, over 4 months, our committee, consisting of the Member for Fong Lim, Member for Blaine, Member for Nightcliff and the Member for Daly and myself, the Member for Wanguri, travelled thousands of kilometres across the Territory, and we listened to hundreds of Territorians and reviewed thousands of pages of evidence. But Madam Speaker, we heard from voices as far as Papunya and across to Numbulwar, and we also heard from the widow of the first person in the world to use voluntary assisted dying, the late Bob Dent. Back in our own territory, Mrs. Judy Dent and the struggles they had back then. Madam Speaker, we heard stories that were raw, emotional and grounded in Territory realities, but for both for and against. Madam Speaker, this inquiry was referred to the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee by the Attorney-General, and I thank her because it allowed us to do that final consultation and check in with those who did not submit any submissions in the previous 2024 report. We were asked to prepare a consolidated consultation paper, consult extensively with communities in the timeframe we were given, particularly in the remote areas. We were asked to evaluate different voluntary assisted dying models and safeguards for all Territorians, with a focus on that would be appropriate for the Northern Territory's context, and identify specific challenges associated with delivering voluntary assisted dying in the Territory. And if the committee recommends adoption, provide drafting instructions, in which we have done. These terms of reference guided every aspect of our inquiry, from whom we spoke to how we examined the evidence, and ultimately we have formed 86 recommendations in a bipartisan approach. Now, Madam Speaker, when this was referred to the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, I did get an influx of emails and phone calls from my own constituents. But every person I spoke to, I did actually specify that I wore 2 hats. I was going to be the member for Wanguri, and I was also on this committee, and actually separated those 2 hats. We heard from doctors and nurses, Aboriginal organisations, faith leaders, lawyers and families who watched their loved ones suffered. Some pleaded for legal compassion through voluntary assisted dying. Others, grounded in faith or cultural law, urged caution for opposition. Both sides spoke from love for their family, deep respect for culture, and the desire for laws that show compassion while safeguarding that trust. Madam Speaker, after examining evidence, the committee made 86 recommendations for the Territory-specific model of voluntary assisted dying. We concluded that the NT should proceed with legislation, but only through a model that fits our geography, cultures and health capacity. The eligibility, adults with decision-making capacity facing intolerable suffering from advanced progressive condition expected to cause death, but no fixed prognosis. Clinical judgment should not guide timing, not arbitrary timeframes. And safeguards, 2 independent medical assessments, interpreters and cultural liaison officers, where needed, were mandatory. Cultural safety embedded as guiding principle with community co-designed Aboriginal health organisation leadership, and conscientious objection, Practitioners and institutions may decline to participate but must provide referral pathways. And as for the oversight, an independent review board to monitor every case and report to Parliament. Palliative care, also parity. VAD must complement, not replace palliative investment. Madam Speaker, culture and country shape how Territorians understand life and death. In Arnhem Land, leaders reminded us that decisions are shared through kinship, and in the Barkly and Alice Springs, health staff described fear of hospitals, echoing historical trauma. But the committee found that any assisted dying must first rebuild trust that medical care is safe, interpreters are impartial, and consent is real. Madam Speaker, for the faith leaders, Christian, Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist and others, engaged with courage and grace. Many hold a deep reverence for life and fear that voluntary assisted dying may contradict moral teachings. Yet even among opponents, there was strong support for compassion and robust palliative care. In fact, I did ask the Australian Christian lobbyist and also at our meeting in Alice Springs with the Baptist Church, and I understood that faith obviously was their underlying reasons for opposing VAD, but I did ask them would they still assist and support people in their community if they wanted to use voluntary assisted dying, and they were supportive of that. The committee affirms conscience must remain free. No practitioner or institution should be compelled to participate, but patients must have access through referrals. That dual respect for conscience and for choice is a defining strength of our approach. Madam Speaker, and the remote hearings were amongst the most powerful moments of this inquiry. In fact, I'm absolutely grateful for being able to be on this committee and to actually understand the remoteness of our territory. Being a suburban electorate seat, it gave me insight to how the whole territory needs to work together. One of the actual remote consultations, and actually it was the first one, which uncovered in how we actually communicate with our Indigenous community members. And so we actually redefined the words voluntary and assisted. We asked them if they would like their own free choice, and we asked them how they would want to be assisted in dying, which most of them would have preferred to would just withdraw from care. With that, that actually gave us insight on how their community works and how they make their decisions on withdrawing from treatment. But that also gave us insight into how we spoke to them so that we could ask if they were okay with others in the community or outside of their community. If they wanted to use voluntary assisted dying, would that harm them? And they actually confirmed that it wouldn't, and that they would be okay with someone else using it. We understood that they would probably never use it. So, Madam Speaker, for our anti-health officials, they were quite frank. Workforce shortages were brought up. Our fragile palliative care infrastructure and long distances pose serious challenges. They supported voluntary assisted dying in principle, but warned that success requires careful phasing, strong governance and investment. And this was actually one of the, as the Chair iterated earlier today, this report now gives us the basis to go back out into our communities to actually work with our community and ask them now how they do sit with VAD. So there is a document now that you can use and actually talk to your constituents, and if you need to ask any questions, I'm pretty sure any of the committee members would be able to assist you with that as well if you have any challenges. I'm not for or against at this stage. I will have to vote according to my electorate, but it was actually enlightening to be a part of this committee so that I could actually form some kind of understanding when I'm communicating with my community. So, Madam Speaker, despite the challenges, the majority of submissions supported voluntary assisted dying as an act of compassion and self-determination. Health professionals spoke of moral distress when unable to relieve suffering. Families even said discussing voluntary assisted dying brought peace, knowing that choice itself could ease fear. And Aboriginal leaders expressed cautious support, provided it was safe, culturally grounded and voluntary. Madam Speaker, many remote community members were against voluntary assisted dying. However, they do support others who wish to use it, albeit they would not. To the point where the committee asked, would it harm again? And they verbatim would say, we would never use it ourselves, but we want others to use it. Madam Speaker, many of these voices were referring to Territorians and urban centres who would most likely be users of the voluntary assisted dying if it becomes available. Our committee mandate was to gather evidence, not pursue ideology. We held open consultations, published interim findings, and invited expert feedback. It would be wrong to dismiss the process as partisan or biased without engaging with its substance. While members may bring forward private bills, timing and process matter, announcing legislation before full drafting or engagement with the committee's findings risks confusion and public mistrust. This inquiry exists not to delay, but to ensure the law we craft is safe, workable and culturally grounded. Madam Speaker, assisted dying cannot be reduced to slogans or urgency. Witnesses were warned of risk, unequal access, language barriers, fragile health infrastructure, and the need for robust cultural safeguards. Faith groups asked for conscious protections, clinicians asked for training and oversight, and families pleaded for both palliative care and choice. These are not barriers. They are not the scaffolding of trust. A bill that glosses over them would fail the people it seeks to serve. And Madam Speaker, from this journey, three truths stand out. Choice requires trust, compassion must be practical, and respect is our compass. The final report sets out a clear course. Draft legislation guided by our 86 recommendations established a voluntary assisted dying implementation task force, fund training, interpreter programs, and cultural liaison roles, strengthen palliative care, deliver public education in first languages, and review the law at 3 years and then every 5 years through independent oversight. And in closing, Madam Speaker, our committee approached this work knowing no law will satisfy every conscience, but silence and suffering are not options. This report does not seek to end life, but to honour it by allowing Territorians to face death with dignity, in accordance with culture, faith and will. And as one submission said, we're not asking for an easy death, we're asking for a gentle one. That is the standard we must meet, a law shaped by compassion, grounded for safety and built for the territory love. And Madam Speaker, I do wish to thank the Secretariat and the team. I wish to thank the other members of the committee as well, as it was very testing with our time frame. And in fact, also one of our trips was a little bit chaotic in the air. So for those who are waiting for this legislation, I do ask you to be a little bit more patient as we are trying as best as we can to get you a bill and for those of us in our electorates to actually consult. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Dale.